Hello, guys. Apologies that I'm a little late. Um, Walk took a little bit longer with the dog than I wanted it to, but otherwise, I'm here now. And we're going to look over all of these games from Saturday and Sunday. But, so thinking about thinking about these games. I'm not gonna lie, I was very happy, I guess, with how the games turned out this weekend. Who got into the playoffs, who didn't. The teams that, in all honesty, if you're talking about them, that didn't make it, didn't make it. Rightfully so, in my opinion. The only team that I would say, is having a terrible end of the season, who probably, if you were to judge in the final week of the season based on how they've played, that shouldn't make it, is maybe the Eagles, but they're still a very talented team. I think that there's just something happening internally with the Eagles. I don't think it's just the coaching. I think it has to do with the players. I think it has to do with, there's a lot of things to me that you have to go wrong for a team that was as good as they were last year. And, you could say, oh yeah, their D coordinator stinks, but they obviously had one of the best D coordinators in the league. And, a defense that is as talented and with as many good players that they have, just, there must be something going on internally. I just don't think that you really can put it all on the defensive coach, because even the offense just isn't good this year. And you look at their team, and it's they lost a couple of players, don't get me wrong, but it's not enough to really say, oh yeah, we're gonna stink next year. But going down the list of games, that I'm going to go and I'm going to quickly kind of brief over these for, a video type of thing. And you guys can tell me your opinions afterwards, or we can start to chat a bit more. Starting off with the Houston Texans playing Indianapolis. Houston and Indianapolis essentially both playing for a playoff spot here. CJ Stroud on his second game back did not disappoint at all. People act as though some of CJ Stroud's throws were kind of off, which I thought was kind of funny. I'm we're kind of luck. I had somebody comment, on Twitter after I was saying that, oh, look at this floater by Stroud, and he's like, oh, well, that was a complete accident, he didn't mean to do that. And I'm like, you know what, I don't buy it. He was out of the pocket, he was trying to create a play, and he did late in the game. It is a little troubling that Houston wasn't able to make the extra point, essentially giving Indianapolis a shot at winning the game, or at least tying it up. But the defense for the Texans really held up and played really well this game. They didn't have a huge running game. They, it wasn't, a super flashy passing attack either. I would say Stroud, played really well and made the passes when he needed to. But looking at, Stroud, he played exactly how he needed to. He didn't have to play super flashy, but he did not turn the ball over at all. And then you look at Indianapolis, no passing game to really speak of. And boy, what a night for Nico Collins. Good for him, type of thing. And it's like the only turnover that there was the Michael Pittman one, which definitely came back to cost the Colts late in the game. But overall, a good defensive performance from Houston against a pretty good offense. Jonathan Taylor gave us kind of a scare, leaving the game. And then they're like, oh, he's questionable. He's not going to come back. But he was tough, and he is what was keeping them in the game. Like, kudos to Jonathan Taylor. He is that guy, and this is the reason why they kept him. But congrats on Houston on a playoff berth. I thought they definitely deserved it. They definitely deserved a playoff berth with the way that he's played and the way that this team has played and turned it around. So moving on, we have Steelers, Ravens. I fully expected the Steelers to win. Their division being ultra competitive this year, the first time ever that after the AFL NFL merger happened, that every team in one division had a winning record. Whereas I know that not in recent history, even not even that far back, we can look to where the 7-9 Rams had made the playoffs, so some time ago. Or was it even the Rams, or I think maybe even the Redskins when Washington was still known by that. But Mason Rudolph playing fine, not doing anything too crazy, but not turning the ball over. And it's not like, Baltimore's defense was going to be a pushover. I think it really showed a lot about Pittsburgh that they were able to run the ball with Najee Harris respectively. Nothing insane, but respectively against a good defense like Baltimore. And, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Freiermuth, a few contributors in the passing game and that sort of thing. But fumbles were kind of a problem for them. This definitely was like a defensive game. 2 fumbles lost for each team, but 6 total on Pittsburgh. Definitely something they're going to need to clean up before they go to visit the Bills in the wild card weekend. But overall, I think that this game, they can show that they can overcome adversity. And congratulations to Pittsburgh. I think that they are pretty deserving. Even though obviously the 7th seed, and it's like this team has been wildly inconsistent, but Tomlin's a good head coach, and he will have them ready for the playoffs next week. Moving on, we have the Buccaneers-Panthers. Not much here to talk about, in my opinion. Not a lot of scoring, not a lot of yards. Crazy that it's like, both QBs, eclipsed essentially 100, 30 yards, 230 yards combined, like extremely low. And then you have, some notable running, from Chase Edmonds and Bryce Young, but otherwise really not anything too crazy in this game. It does make me worry about Tampa Bay. They seem to be doing really, really well, in my opinion. They seem to be doing really, really well, in my opinion, before the last couple weeks where they've been kind of just frigid and they haven't really been scoring too much. But congrats, he secured the division, albeit the weakest division in football, in my opinion, right now. But, congrats, Buccaneers, on securing your playoff berth and playing the Gosh, I can't even remember who they're playing next week. We'll get to that. Oh, it's Buccaneers Eagles, and you're gonna go up against a struggling Eagles team, and this seems to be like it's gonna be the most underwhelming matchup, honestly, next weekend. Unless both these teams correct their mistakes and they come to play, because it could be a good game in my opinion if both teams come to play, but with how these teams play this week, it could be a doozy of a Monday night showdown for what Super Wild Card weekend. Moving on, we have Bengals Browns. The Bengals won. Didn't get into the playoffs, but like I said, they were 8-8 coming into the game. The Browns were resting quite a few guys. Jake Browning playing somewhat well, 18-24 for 156 with 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. The Browns obviously playing Jeff Driscoll, having a very average day, 50%, couple TDs, a couple of interceptions, sacked a few times. But then, the running game for Cincinnati coming up huge, 111 for Mixon, Brown 43. And quite not much to say in terms of the passing game. You didn't have Boyd involved really with 4 yards. You had Jamar Chase with only 19. Just really couldn't get the ball to any of these guys, which I think just bodes well for Cleveland. I think Cleveland, obviously, after the Ravens, is the second best team, but I wouldn't say it's a huge margin. between the two. Each team is led by their defense, where I think that Cleveland, they have a pretty good offense, but I think that the Ravens have a little bit better of an offense, But, the Browns, really no passing game to speak of. Only 5 guys involved, on 13 completions, and nobody above 100 yards, or nobody even above 70 in this entire game. But, no fumbles. Jake Browning had a fumble, but yeah, the Bengals, playing a pretty solid game, even though they unfortunately did not make the playoffs this year. Moving on to Lions-Vikings. The Vikings I thought were going to play a lot better of a game, to be honest with you, but it seemed like the same kind of matchup. It just didn't have 4 picks from Mullins. Instead, he has 2 touchdowns and 2 picks and 396. But in the previous matchup a couple weeks ago, he had like 420 some yards and 4 picks, And the only reason I say that this is cause for concern with Detroit is if they get up against one of these teams who is high flying in the postseason, which the Lions play the Rams, and I think that it's going to be a true test for them, even though the Rams, don't exactly have the most explosive offense. They will chip away at you with Stafford throwing low to Puka, who obviously just set the catch record and the yards record, I believe. And then you also have Cooper Kupp to deal with, and the Rams are going to be a true test for the Lions, in my opinion. Very good matchup. I think that the Lions, it's definitely, obviously, their game to lose, but we'll see how they handle it, and we'll see if, Stafford brings a little bit more pizzazz in that game, because obviously he's playing his former team, and this just looks... And to me, he's obviously a way better quarterback than Mullins, and could easily, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he throws for over 400 with his offense. As their O-line has been playing really well on the Rams, and it looks like a game that might end up being a shootout, but I think that the Rams have the better defense, obviously. But yeah, crazy performances in this game from receivers, notably Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously Justin Jefferson, 192 yards. But to me, this is one of the things that it's like, yeah, you had 14 targets to Justin Jefferson, but there was no more. The second highest was to Addison, and he had 8 targets with 4 receptions. And I just think that now the Vikings obviously aren't in the playoffs, but they really need to solve their offensive problem where it can't just be Jefferson. It can't just be a one-man show, or you're going to end up having this man with Hall of Fame stats, but nothing to show for it in the postseason or anything like that. Moving on to Jets-Patriots, what is likely the last game that the New England Patriots were coached by Bill Belichick. I actually feel thankful that he is not going to be on the team anymore. I think the Patriots are set to go into the dark ages. Who even cares if they draft a QB like everyone is saying? Like, I don't think that's their issue. I think their issue is that they really don't have a run game to speak of. They don't really have a pass game to speak of. What are the Patriots doing? I mean, it could very well go into the dark times again, where it's like the only glowing history of the Patriots was Brady Belichick. But looking at New York, you got Simeon not playing well, to be honest, 8 of 20. Breece Hall carrying, though, with 37 carries for 178. Obviously, he would have had 36 carries for 128 if he didn't have his long carry of 50 yards. But he's really shown that he is the back. I think that it's really helped him and reassured him that the team released Cook. Obviously, they released Cook because he's likely going to a contender, and he did go, obviously, to the Ravens. And we'll see how that plays out because they really are hurting for running back depth, to be honest, with all the injuries. But yeah, kudos to the Jets. We'll see you next year with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. Moving on to Saints-Falcons. Where in the world was this Saints all season long? Obviously, you go up against Desmond Ridder, who it's like did only have 1 pick, right? But which, you'd think it'd be a lot worse in a blowout win like this, but clearly still not doing anything to really, solidify him. And they did mostly put the pressure on Ridder with a less than solid run game with 78 total yards for the offense, which I don't know why you wouldn't. You've got such serviceable backs in Algier and Bijan that it's like, what are you going to do? And even Bijan being your leading receiver. And it just seems to me that, the Falcons, they may draft a QB, to be honest. I don't think Ritter's it. Who knows, honestly, if it's the system, though, too, because Arthur Smith, they're saying is going to get fired. I guess, has he been fired? Let me look it up real quick. So Arthur Smith did get fired, and I mean, who knows what the new regime is going to do. Arthur Smith, to me, seemed like a hothead. He seemed way too angry and like tense, and that'll rub off on your players. They can't play as loose. They don't. There's just that the atmosphere that you're in is, and especially the precedent set by the head coach is what's going to be your reality. And I think that ruled the Falcons this year. This was their division to win at one point, as far as I'm concerned, where it's like you've got so much talent, you've got a good defense, you've got good players around the board. You just need to actually put it together. And clearly Arthur Smith, a crazy blowout loss by the Saints. But the Saints, it shouldn't have come down to this. In all honesty, I feel like you guys having a bad end of the season, like you doomed yourself. A lot of people saying, "Oh, of course, the Packers game that we ended up losing 17-16 was the one that comes back to haunt us." But it's like it's a season of failures where you guys were talking highly of Derek Carr, and there was, glimpses of good games he had. The one thing I'll say about this game that, I think, this year that I think has proven sign is that Chris Olave is a great wide receiver and a great weapon, and they need to surround him with more talent. Even though I think that, Rashid Shaheed is definitely solid as well. They just need to fix their offense. I don't think they have many player holes. Like, I think that, Carr can do it if he's not turning the ball over. And then if you have your running back Kamara playing, then he can still do really, really well. I think Kamara's a great back, but this team just unable to put it together. Both these teams, as we know, are not in the playoffs. Now we come to the Jaguars and Tennessee. Tennessee playing really, really well. Ryan Tannehill, I think, playing to show that he still has something. But to me, it doesn't even really come down to Tannehill. It comes down to the fact that they tried to make Lawrence carry this team when he's not fully healthy still. And I feel like even though this team... they were, even though this team was playing for a playoff spot, if they had got in, it would have been contingent on whether they have a healthy Trevor Lawrence to win, or whether they were willing to actually sit him if he wasn't guaranteed to be 100%. Because I can't remember who they started last week, but he played fine. He played well enough to win. And the Jacksonville, they were winning in or losing out. And it's like, it's kind of disappointing that, on paper, he doesn't look like he played insanely bad, 29 of 43 for 280 yards. But goodness, he shouldn't be throwing picks every single game that he's out on the field. And they just, not really a run game to speak of, with 82 total yards. But 10 of those were from a scrambling Lawrence. And it's like, I get it. Evan Ingram had over 100 receptions this year. Really good for him. A reset from, his days as a Giant. Proof that he can play and he can be explosive. He can be a good option for him. And then Calvin Ridley eclipsing 100. And I think he had kind of a lackluster year. But then again, from not playing an entire year last year, I think it's kind of expected. We saw the same kind of thing with Deshaun Watson playing extremely average this year when he did play early in the year on the Browns. And clearly it's not the guys around him, because they're making... and I'm not saying Flacco's bad. I'm not saying he's average, but he's playing a lot better than what anybody would have expected him, a guy who wasn't even in anybody's training camp, this year. But, sorry, Jacksonville, you guys really... a terrible end of the season, which, even if they had won this game, it still leaves a lot to be desired on whether or not you belong in the playoffs, and they would most likely be a first-round exit. So, better here in the regular season than to get embarrassed in the wild card weekend. Moving on to Seahawks-Cardinals, a pretty close, scrappy game. This is what I expected from this. It's a divisional game. Arizona, despite their record, has been very scrappy, and even more so once Kyler Murray came back. And I really think that Kyler, can, obviously brought a spark to this team. And, who knows if he felt like the pressure, if that motivated him to play better. But, obviously the Seattle, who the heck knows what's going to happen. They obviously were eliminated from playoff contention. And even with a win here, But, they needed a Green Bay loss. But yeah, this team has a lot to figure out, and I don't know if it really does come down to just quarterback, because it seems to me like they have enough talent. They just do not put it together to where, you can have an impressive game with any QB. Moving on to my Packers against the Bears. Now, I was honestly somewhat worried going into this, because I honestly thought, maybe the Bears come out. Fields is able to not only use his arm, but use his legs. But it seems to me like Barry I don't know if he's playing for his job for Green Bay or if he's trying to show that he can adapt his defense, because we put a spy on Fields so much to where he obviously couldn't run very much with only 27 yards on 8 carries. And even Khalil Herbert did not run very well. And this was like the number one rushing attack offense. And I still don't think that this really saves Barry his job. I think the only way Barry saves his job, and obviously there's so many people that are like, he shouldn't be able to save his job. He should be able to come in, week out and produce these kinds of games, which I agree with. I think it's just way too sporadic sometimes to where it's like, we just look like a lot of turnstiles on defense and guys are blowing by us. But looking at this game, and the fact that they contained Fields, who did have a good amount of rushing yards week 1, on obviously it was a worse team back then. The defense wasn't as good, and the Packers, we did score more. But the one thing I'll say about this game is the oddball calls. The catch by DJ Moore that clearly hits the ground, it bounces up above his hands, and he's able to bring it up, basket catch kind of style or whatever. And then the fact that they say Bo Melton didn't catch the TD, even though he's holding it against his thigh and has more control than Moore had, and just some oddball things, and that sort of thing. And then you've got, the Bears. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's bitterness or whatever it was. But you got them trash talking after the game. Brisker saying that none of the receivers on the Packers are stars, which, maybe you can say that because, none of them are established talents. You've got so many rookies. You've got guys who it's like this is their first year and, nobody's schemed for them type of thing. But only time will tell. But right now, it's serviceable, and it's not like, granted, there are some guys running free, playing smart, like Wicks, Reed, and then Bo Melton, making some tough catches. And Tucker Kraft this game, hella blocking, not so much in the receiving game, but really happy Musgrave was able to come back, only had 1 catch, but I think he was really limited this game. I feel like he was on the field for such a limited amount of, they were on such a limited, thing and, type of thing. But, overall, a pretty clean game by my Packers, in my opinion. Obviously, the fumble by Love, I don't really hold against him because the play, whatever happened, caused him to have to play hero ball when he wasn't. And for the most part, I think that he did a good job. For the situation, and that he would have had the first. He just, the fumble was kind of bizarre too. They say to put the helmet on the ball, but it was kind of this weird nuance where the helmet hits the ball, but it's like, there's no technique for how he did it, but overall, I think, the defense played really well. I think, obviously we get, it's a lot easier for your defense to look better with pressure, and clearly 5 sacks on Fields from numerous guys, where it's like, we had 5 sacks and 5 different guys. Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, Lucas Van Ness, Carl Brooks, and Quay Walker, and it's like no Rashawn Gary on that list, which is nuts, But a good amount of tackle for loss too, 10 tackle for loss, and hard to establish a running game with that kind of thing, kind of stuff happening. So sound game by my Packers. Obviously, I think that we would have liked to put up more points, but Jordan Love, putting up another 300-yard game, only missing 5 passes. And I'm really excited for the postseason, securing our spot in the playoffs as the 7th seed, since the Rams obviously won. But looking ahead, we have Chiefs, Chargers, a lot of people resting. Gabbert, 50%, Easton Stick, little above 50%. This just didn't look like a very, this just didn't look like a very, good game to me, but it was kind of expected to be like this, where it's like, who are you playing on the Kansas City? And then it's like the Chargers, obviously, clearly, had fired their coach, have Easton Stick, and then it's like, no running game to speak of. 10 carries from Eckler for 11 yards. I mean, the Chiefs defense, congrats on them. They had secured the 3rd seed, but not much to say about this game. Moving on to Raiders Broncos. The Raiders handling the Broncos, Stidham 20 of 34 for 272. It's not terrible, considering this was his, 2nd week in a row after Russell Wilson's benching. And Aiden O'Connell, 20 of 31 for 244. I doubt that gives them faith to, keep him and have him going. And obviously we'll see who they hire as the Raiders head coach, even though even Davante Adams has said that, the interim is his guy, and you got to kind of do what's going to make the players happy. And it's like, unless they're going to go for like a huge name like Belichick, depending on what it is, but it's like the Raiders probably aren't the most appealing spot for Belichick. Even though I do think that if he came here, he could really, abuse Davante Adams. I just think that would be an insane, tandem, wide receiver coach tandem type of thing. But yeah, the Broncos not looking very good. And it's like, this was a team that they said was the hottest at one point this year, but pretty much these last 2 weeks, or last 3 weeks, it's just like you guys had a very good shot to get into the playoffs, but you've looked bad these last few weeks, and who knows what's going to happen. Even though it sounds like Sean Payton is going to get all the power to decide whatever the hell he wants to do, and that they might fire the GM because of that. Because it's like, if you're having a coach GM, where's there room for a GM? Going on to Giants Eagles, obviously this is kind of a game that's like, even with the subpar play of the Philadelphia, I thought it was going to be at least close, but it wasn't. Jalen Hurts not looking good. Marcus Mariota getting plugged in. Tyrod Taylor looking very calm and content, like he could, possibly play. I've always liked Tyrod Taylor, to be honest. He has, even though he's up there in age, he's got good mobility and good pocket presence, but I don't know what to say about the Eagles. They are going as my weakest team in the playoffs. And, I'm going to do that, where I'm going to tell you guys the power, the power rank, the playoff power rankings that I have at the end of this. But, just kind of crazy that Philadelphia could have easily secured at least the 2nd seed, if not battled for the 1st, if their team hadn't slumped so bad. But yeah, next week against the Buccaneers, they better actually bring it, or they're going to be a 1st round exit after being in the Super Bowl last year. Rams, Niners. The Niners obviously not playing Purdy, which I heard a lot of people had a problem with because it's not like this dude's a seasoned veteran. Yeah, he played really well last year. But yeah, they played Darnold, and I mean Darnold, I guess, he played fine for for being the backup, 16 to 26, no interceptions, sacked a few times, but also bringing a kind of a scrambling ability, not much, but 7 for 19. But obviously he had Debo and Ayuk, but he didn't have Kittle. The Rams, I don't think it was that much of a problem that they were playing Wentz. Wentz actually scrambled quite a bit, and obviously Puka, they really weren't giving him much space. The Niners did not want him to get the record. Obviously, it's a divisional game, and everyone should have their focus on Puka for this offense. Clearly, the go-to guy now, and it's pretty crazy to me that the Rams, they were able to do this well, and obviously next week in the wild card, Stafford isn't going to be running as much as Wentz is, obviously, but pretty good game defensively as well, where they were getting after Sam Darnold, who's pretty mobile as well, and scrambled 7 times. But, congrats to the Rams for getting the 6th seed, and, they very well could beat the Lions next week. I don't think that this team should be shied away from. They have completely 360'd it from last year. Congratulations, Rams. Moving on to Cowboys Commanders. At one point, this game was close, but obviously, it got kind of blown out, and Howell throwing 2 picks again, getting sacked 4 times. Prescott had essentially a free game to me, where it's like, oh yeah, he passed for 31 of 36. He wasn't really pressured at all. But then again, Washington, since they got rid of, their primary rushers on defense, I mean, they just haven't been able to do anything. The Cowboys having a pretty good rushing attack, nothing insane, but they were able to run it with Pollard and Dowdle. Yeah, sorry my accent, but CeeDee Lamb having 98 yards. I think that 13 targets, 13 receptions. I think that it's really easy, and it's surprising to me that he didn't have a 100-yard game. People might say that I just want to bash the Cowboys because my Packers are going up against them. But to be honest with you, the thing is this year is that they want to talk about how they're undefeated at home, and I say that with the tone because realistically they shouldn't have lost. They shouldn't have beat the Lions. There's people that are saying that no, this is what's reported. The Lions are making this shit up. Like, oh, this is what's going on. But to me, it's just I don't know. It's absolutely nuts. And I think that the refs, this year have just been, there needs to be some sort of an accountability for them, which I'm sure will get talked in the offseason. And if it doesn't, it's going to make people more and more mad if it's this kind of league where who the heck knows what's going to get called anymore, unless it's blatantly obvious. But congratulations, Dallas. Not really. You played really, really well against bad teams, non-playoff teams, and we'll see if you really, bring it in the playoffs, I guess. Because even with, not any pressure, Dak still threw a pick in this game. This looks like the kind of game where it's like, oh, you essentially play a defense that just doesn't have any sort of star talent. And in today's league, you just have you just have you don't really have much to go up against, and you need star talent on the defense in order to have a successful defense in today's league. Like, they'll exploit any weak part you have. Moving on to the final game, which was a hell of a game, Bills-Dolphins. Bills, they looked really rough. It was really oddball. I thought Allen looked bizarre. It's kind of crazy to me that he still had 359 yards. But clearly, even though he's apparently not fully healthy, he has quite the composure as a quarterback, where it's like, it reminds me a little bit of Brett Favre with a bit more skill where he's placing the ball. Some missed opportunities, though. He missed Stephon Diggs on what would have been a huge, free touchdown, where Diggs, got past Ramsey, made him look like a subpar corner on that play. And you've got Miami, who still can't win the division, and ultimately lost both games to Buffalo within their division this year. And you don't have Mostert, which sucks, but to me it's like you were only going to beat Buffalo one way, throwing the ball, with the way that their defense is built, because they do not allow much on the run, which I think is very important to show that the pass doesn't come easy. And I mean, they obviously didn't have Waddle on Miami. But looking at this game, I think Buffalo, they clean up the mistakes, and they can definitely be the third best team in the AFC, because right now, I really can't tell you who is the third best team after the Ravens and then the Browns. I feel like it is such a toss-up, and that any of these teams can win. As far as I'm concerned, unless you're the Browns or the Ravens, you aren't sitting cozy thinking we have the talent to win these close games and to feel like we control our own destiny. But with this, and looking ahead to next week, I'm now gonna go over, I guess, my power rankings for the playoffs. I'm not gonna mention the Niners or the Ravens as my top two. I would put the Ravens as my top team, and then the Niners second, to be honest with you. Clearly, because the Ravens, they handled the Niners, to be honest with you. But I'm only gonna do my power rankings for these guys, and my worst team out of all of these is actually gonna be Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is the 12th best team this weekend. I think they have to prove that they belong this weekend. And I don't think Tampa Bay is going to be a pushover team. Obviously, they won their division with a 9-8 record, barely over 500. And Philadelphia was 11-6. And even though Tampa Bay hasn't looked the best these last couple weeks, they were pretty hot. 5 games ago for the 3 out of the 5 remaining games, to be honest. And they looked pretty tough. The next team that I'm going to say I think is number 11 is, I would say it is Tampa Bay. This is mainly because I think that with the number of weapons that they've had, the fact that they didn't really do that much against a Panthers team that was playing for nothing. I mean, it is a divisional game, don't get me wrong, but I feel like, if Baker's going to be your QB next year, he should be able to put up at least, a couple TDs, where he put up 0. And they had to rely on their kicker to win that game for them, essentially. But yeah, Tampa Bay's 11, mainly because I think it's just not reassuring that, yeah, you won a game 9-0. It's reassuring for your defense, don't get me wrong, but obviously the Panthers, the final 2 games of the season, 0 points. And I think that's more on them than the teams they've played. Because Jacksonville did play them the week prior, and I mean, Jacksonville's defense isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but they're not like locked down good, keep you down to 0 in today's league. The next team that I'll say I think is, a team that, many people are kind of hopeful for, and I have been kind of pulling for them this season because I think their division was a bit weaker, is going to be Houston. I think that Houston is good, but they need to keep on proving it. You know what I mean? I think that Stroud, they really hit the nail on the head with him, clearly. But the thing that's not sold on me is their defense. They have had some games where their defense just looks a little bit shoddy. And I think that Ryans is playing really well. But I think that, playing well is coaching well. But sometimes you just can't, have such a young team that doesn't know winning super well. And obviously they made it to 10-7, so they won a good handful of games this year. But it's a little inconsistent, and we'll really see, I guess, what CJ Stroud does as a rookie, as the only rookie quarterback in the playoffs. Obviously, the next team that I want to talk about is Pittsburgh. I place Pittsburgh here because I really think that Rudolph has played really, really well since he has started. Don't get me wrong, it's not like he's lit, it up or anything like that. It's not like he has done anything, but he has provided more of a spark than any other starter for the Steelers. And don't get me wrong, this defense is legit for Pittsburgh. Watt, healthy all year, second player ever, or maybe not second, but one of only a few players that has had 2 19-plus sack seasons in the regular season. Next to J.J. Watt, of course, and I can't remember, to be honest, the other person, to be honest. I think there's a third and a fourth, but I can't remember. But yeah, Pittsburgh, I think that their inexperience may hurt them with their weapons, but overall, I think that defense, can, if they play well enough, they could, definitely upset Buffalo. Given that they limit their mistakes or eliminate them completely. The next team that I'll talk about is Green Bay. Now, I think we're a scary team, and I would rank us higher, but should Barry start to coach like he had before these last 2 and that sort of thing, I honestly would maybe say that Green Bay's worse than the Steelers and maybe even worse than the Texans, to be honest with you. I think the offense is playing really, really well, and the defense obviously has played well these last couple weeks. And obviously the Vikings game was a little weird because they probably started the wrong quarterback, but even still, you got Jefferson who just, seems to destroy teams even without good quarterback play. But yeah, that Green Bay is the next on the list, just ahead of Pittsburgh. Going to the next team. This might shock some people, but I am going to say Dallas. I think Dallas is the next best on this list, even though they are the 2 seed for the NFC. The reason I say this is because clearly they are kind of susceptible to being super one-dimensional, and then their defense isn't really that good against the run. I think that, and I mean, I'll talk more about this on Friday when we have, the preview for the games, but I think that my Green Bay Packers have a good shot because you've seen Aaron Jones these last few games. He's led the league in yards and he's led the league in average, and he looks like the old Aaron Jones that is willing to carry the load, almost like you don't need a second running back, which A.J. Dillon clearly didn't play. But if they have a second running back, watch out, because we can, run a lot on you. But Dallas, to me, even though they've done really well, obviously they've had, they had the Detroit game, which was weird, and I mean they wouldn't even have won that game unless they had kind of a fluke of a touchdown to CD. You could say, well, the Lions clearly didn't finish the play. But it's like, how many times is that going to happen this late in the year? I really just don't see it happening all the time. So yeah, I've got Dallas right here. The next team that I have is the Rams. And the reason why the Rams is they clearly have a good passing attack. Stafford can distribute it to so many different guys. Puka Nacua is playing really well, but then they also have a defense that is, not a pushover. It's not the defense they once had, obviously, with Donald, Von Miller, and Jalen Ramsey, but it's a good defense. Against a healthy Aaron Donald, I never count a defense like that out because he's still the impact player that he is. Moving on from the Rams, I am going to say the next team is Buffalo. Buffalo, I think, is doing really well. Buffalo, they just beat Miami, and you could say, oh, why would you not rank them higher than Miami, to be honest with you? But it's like, to me, it is the sketchiness of Allen with his turnover issues that could be really exploited in the playoffs. And I think it's going to be a good test against the Steelers, obviously, come Sunday, the first game Sunday, to see whether or not he can really limit it against a good defense. Going on to the next team, I am going to say Detroit. Detroit, if Hutchinson is playing the way he was, and he's really, making impact plays that limit, the points scored, goodness. It's a scary thought because of their high-flying offense. I think that they have a O-line that's going to make it very hard for teams to get to Goff and to make him throw bad throws. But I also think that the way the Lions play is a very safe and chip away at you kind of ball where they can, pull ahead and essentially burn out your defense in a first half. I think it's a very, very effective style of play where it's like low risk and you don't need guys to be doing these crazy things to win games. But moving on from Detroit, I'm going to say Miami. I think that Miami, they played a very good game against the Bills. They just didn't close it off. And I just think that Tua was kind of off this game for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. But I just don't. It's really crazy to me. Then the next team that I'm going to say is Kansas City. The reason why I have Kansas City this high is because I think that playoff Mahomes is going to come out. They're going to do some really game manager kind of stuff, Andy Reid, where they are going to scheme the hell out of Kelsey to get open. And I'm kind of saying this more on precedent that Kansas City that Kansas City, I'm seeing this more on precedent that Kansas City always ups their game in the playoffs. And I mean, this may be the year that they have a first round exit because they are playing Miami. And I think if Miami scores too much, I don't see Kansas City keeping up with them. But Kansas City's just different in the playoffs, type of thing. And I can hardly imagine them going out in wild card weekend and losing, even though I think the odds are higher this year. And then, of course, we have Cleveland. Cleveland is obviously, I don't really need to say much. Out of the 11-6 teams here, I feel like they're leagues ahead. They're leagues ahead of, these other teams. Great defense that's not really going to let up anything. The only team that I think can beat them is the Ravens, but even that isn't even like a sure thing. It seems like Cleveland and the Ravens are going to be the teams to beat in the playoffs, and that you can't really, knock Cleveland that much because, Flacco's playing well, Amari Cooper. They don't have, the only weakness I see is they don't seemingly have that much of a run game, I guess. But they have enough that it's like, spread the ball around, and Njoku seems to finally be coming in and of his own. But overall, I think it's just a really, fun time to be a Cleveland fan, and it's been a long time coming because they have a talented team. Otherwise, I'm going to stop recording there. And if there's anyone in here and you guys kind of want to chat about anything, just let me know. But I think a good batch of games, this weekend. The only one I would say would maybe be kind of shitty is our Monday night game of Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. I'm kind of confused as to why they're on Monday night, I guess. Maybe it's because Tampa Bay is the worst division winner, and then Philadelphia, it's like, has been playing bad. So they're like, well, maybe if people don't want to watch, don't make them watch on Monday night, type of thing before a work day, but it looks like a good batch of games. I'm really excited. I think that, all these teams kind of match up pretty well against each other. And it's like we've got Tyreek going back to Kansas City, his old team. Who knows? Maybe he'll put on a show. You've got Houston playing Cleveland, which is, in Houston. But I think that it'll be fun to see what Stroud can do against a defense of this caliber, see how he measures up. Green Bay at Dallas, obviously my teams, I'm super pumped. I think that we can beat Dallas, if I'm saying anything. I'm not expecting us to win, though, because I just think that we're going to need some things to go our way more than likely, because I think that, while we did some good things against the Bears, and the Bears had been playing really well defensively, I think that, it's going to be exciting to see Zach Tom line up against Micah Parsons, and he's been playing really well. But, there's no guarantees against a team like Dallas. They can, all it takes is a couple of bad turnovers, which I've seen this year forced by them, and they can blow a game wide open to where it's like, the other team is never catching up. Obviously, Rams, Detroit, we have Stafford playing the Lions. And the Lions, finally making the playoffs. Obviously, a lot of teams this year that didn't make the playoffs last year. And I think that's also just very exciting. But if you guys don't have anything to say, that's really going to do it for me. And we'll see you guys on Friday, obviously. But hopefully your team made the playoffs. If they did not, I am sorry about it. It really sucks. I remember last year I was looking in, obviously, with my Packers not making it. And then all the speculation of Rodgers. And it's always kind of unfun time and you're unsure of a lot of things going into next year usually. Of like, oh, what's my team gonna do to get over the hump to get into the playoffs? But I want to thank you guys for watching, and that'll be it for this episode of Cast. And as always, go Pack, go.